Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Leninhawk Tawk. Full disclosure, I was originally going to record this particular video on camera, but if you are in the United States or Canada right now on Christmas Eve of 2022 when I'm recording this, you will know that there is a giant cold snap just hitting North America right now, and in some places it's even worse. It's a full-on snowstorm. So, because it's very cold here, I'm ensconced in a fluffy robe. It's a Disney Tower of Terror robe that I got for Christmas a few years back. Back when I wasn't single and actually got presents from somebody. And I have a little portable heater to my side because the heat of my apartment is not doing the job. So I figured this was probably not the best way to appear on camera, and I just record in audio only for this. So for those of you who actually wanted to see my face, my apologies, but otherwise the same content of the video will be here. So I wanted to make a little video about not fan service specifically, because when we think of the phrase fan service, we think about filmmakers or studios throwing nuggets to hardcore fans as sort of a shameless attempt to garner their favor, and that's not quite what I'm talking about here. But I wanted to talk about not even really entitled fans, but just sort of maybe giving fans what they claim they want is not for the best or not what they actually want. And I wanted to start off with the discussion of some of the discourse around the upcoming Scream 6, and then I'll go off into some different directions here. So recently, there was a lot of chatter online among Scream 6 fans or people looking forward to the film about the character Stu Macher being in the new movie. Stu Macher, of course, was one of the original killers in the original 1996 Scream, played by Matthew Lillard. And in that movie, he was killed by having a CRT TV dropped on his head. Now, would a CRT being dropped on your head actually kill you or shatter and explode? Probably not, but it happened in the movie, so that's what happened. And, we've had 5 films released, and there's been no mention that this character is anything other than dead. In Scream 2, Randy, when talking about the killers of the first one, he uses the past tense and says, Stu Macher was a pussy-ass wet rag, was past tense. And there's no mention made of him in, obviously, I consider Scream 3 to not be canon, but if you're one of the contrarians who says that Scream 3 is an actual installment of Scream, since they go back and mention the original stuff there with the whole Roman Bridger half-brother bullshit, if he were alive, that would probably come up there. Or even in Scream 5, we have Stu's old house and Stu's nephew, who is killed. So if Stu were alive, that would be mentioned. But then people would come back and say, oh, well, maybe Stu's alive and no one knows it. How would they not know it? Did his body disappear from the house and then if someone was like, uh-oh, SpaghettiOs? Or, did he swap bodies and they buried someone else? I mean, they still did have some DNA testing available in 96. I mean, they had DNA testing for the O.J. Simpson trial in, what was that, 93, 94? So I don't think he could have faked his death or anything in any plausible way. Now, obviously, you can do anything in a movie, it doesn't have to be plausible, but the Scream films, by and large, take place in a fairly realistic, natural world, devoid of anything supernatural or very out there. So to have Stu be alive after all this time doesn't make sense, and would sort of almost be universe-breaking, kind of like in the non-canon Scream 3 when Jay and Silent Bob show up, despite that film not being in continuity with the rest of the View Askew universe. So, yeah, they could bring him back, and that would make some fans happy, but it would make zero fucking sense and would be tonally off completely. But there was the theory that, Stu is back and he's running a cult of Ghostface, and I don't think that's actually happening. A cult of Ghostface could happen. I think I mentioned that in my most recent video where I went over my thoughts or my theories that Scream 6 is about true crime specifically as the target of satire or the theme of that one. But I don't think Stu would be running it like some sort of cult leader. I think if Stu made an appearance, it would have to be similar to Billy's appearance in Part 5, where he's just like a schizophrenic hallucination of Sam's, and not actually, like alive and back. Especially because, Billy can't. He was shot in the fucking head on camera. So that's not happening. But it's just sort of weird that it's like this one thing fans want. And then some fans were really upset because Kevin Williamson recently gave an interview where he said, like, no, Stu Macher is definitively dead. And yes, Kevin Williamson is not a writer on Scream 6. It's the Radio Silence guys, or the same guys who wrote 5. So they could counteract what Kevin Williamson wanted, but Stu's dead, guys. Come on. And so and another thing people have been about, fans specifically, they're very precious about who should and should not die in another Scream film. Like, I see plenty of fans that are like, oh, well, you better not kill Gale, or you better not kill Kirby, or you better not kill... And in my head, I'm just like, these are slasher movies, right? They can't let every character live because you like them and don't want to see them die. In fact, it's more powerful and more dramatically interesting if you kill characters that you don't want to see die. Like, there were many complaints about Dewey getting killed in the previous Scream, because Dewey was, a beloved character and a genuinely good character as far as his personality. And if you want to take it outside of the fictitious realm, David Arquette doesn't have a lot going for him career-wise, so he probably would have been okay to make Scream films forever, even after, they're underpaying Neve Campbell, and if, Courtney Cox decided she didn't want to do them. In fact, I would have preferred, personally, if they killed off Gale Weathers and kept Dewey around. But they made a choice, and, it added stakes. Because one of the things is, if you don't kill off your surviving characters, it takes away some of the inherent drama of these films, because you're giving them this artificial plot armor where they can't be hurt. So, like Scream 2, everyone loves Randy. I love Randy. I was really upset to see Randy die, but you needed to kill a survivor to keep the stakes up. One of the massive problems, of many problems that Scream 3 had, is that it didn't kill off any of the core survivors. It just killed off Cotton Weary, who was always nothing more than a side character, really. They could have made him more, but they decided not to. And then in Scream 4, they didn't kill off any of the survivors, and that was one of the weaknesses of that film outside of the whole Aaron Kruger written hospital finale there. So but some people are just very precious that, oh, you can't kill off any of these characters. So what, you're just going to introduce a bunch of one-off characters and just kill them like a season of Stranger Things? Because then it takes away from the inherent drama. Then you have less conflict, then it feels too safe, and it just feels anodyne and poor. And so I can't get these people who are like, oh, well, they can't kill Gale, we'll be pissed, or they can't kill Kirby, we'll be pissed. I'm like, what kind of slasher movie do you want where none of the main characters die? That feels like weak. You have to kill off some of the main characters, or else there's no stakes. You need stakes in order to care and be invested in the drama. So I don't get that. And so that's another thing where people are sort of like, oh, if X dies, we riot or something. Like, really? I don't get that mentality. Now, of course, there are ways that you can kill off characters in a movie like this, and you do it in a shitty way. I think Dewey's death in 5 served a purpose. So there's a new killer in Woodsboro, and Sydney does not live in Woodsboro. She seems to live... Well, it seems to be within driving distance, because she gets there pretty early after Dewey dies, so she's not like 3,000 miles away or anything. Chances are if Woodsboro is in California, she's probably in a different part of California or somewhere else, or maybe in the Pacific Northwest or something, but probably in a different part of California. But she's not coming anywhere near Woodsboro when there's a new Ghostface killer, which I can understand, especially since that movie says that she has kids and is married, or partnered up or what have you. And so the way to bring her back was to kill off somebody she knows and cares about, and that lures her in. So it has a plot function. His death serves the plot to bring that character back. And I think if you didn't kill Dewey or whatever, there'd be no organic reason to bring Sydney back. I mean, or you could have killed Gale and done the same thing, but I don't think killing anybody else or any other event would bring her back unless you did something weird like bring her father back, who we haven't seen since Scream 2 or something. But yeah, so it serves a plot function as well. So it has a service within the story. So I didn't really have a problem with them killing Dewey. I think it works for that film, but people are still fucking pissed about it. It's like it makes sense for the movie. I mean, it's not like the movies in the 80s where the final girl from part 1 is knocked off unceremoniously in the first 5 minutes of part 2, like they did with Friday the 13th part 2, or even like Hostel part 2 if you want to go to something slightly more recent. I mean, he's in like a full half of the movie. Basically, his death kicks off the third act. It's the climax of the second act is his death. So I don't really get that. And then to take this out of the realm of the Scream films, you see a lot of this where fans demand something, and what they're demanding is kind of stupid or would make for a worse movie. And then they're pissed off. And you can go too far in the other direction where you subvert expectations too much. I'll take an example that I think they should have listened to the fans more, and that's with the 2016 Ghostbusters. So you had the first 2 Ghostbusters, and then there was no Ghostbusters 3 for various reasons. Ghostbusters 2, even though it still did well, it underperformed compared to expectations. And then Bill Murray didn't want to do a third one for various reasons. He had a falling out with Harold Ramis after Groundhog Day in the early 90s. So, that sort of thing. But for the longest time, people wanted a Ghostbusters 3. And if the people at Sony, at Columbia Pictures, knew what they were doing and they wanted to reboot the Ghostbusters franchise, they would have listened to the fans and know that, there's been this pent-up desire for a Ghostbusters 3, even among people who don't like Ghostbusters 2, people who I'll never understand, because I kind of prefer Ghostbusters 2 to Ghostbusters 1. That's my weird taste. But instead, they decided to do a hard reboot. And then when that hard reboot was being made, it was spun as if, they just don't want to see an all-girl Ghostbusters. And yeah, there were some right-wing trolls who really hated that. But mainly it was that it wasn't that they were upset, and I guess I'm speaking personally here. It's not that I was upset that they were doing an all-girl Ghostbusters. In fact, one of the ideas they were floating on was something that was in continuity with the original Ghostbusters, but it was still an all-girl team that had, like, Anna Kendrick and Aubrey Plaza and stuff like that. Not that they would necessarily have signed on for anything like that, but it seemed like it was a cool idea to have that sort of generation of female comedians as Ghostbusters. But it was the fact that they were doing a hard break from the continuity when, for years, for decades, we had wanted a part 3. And so then Ghostbusters 2016 comes out, and not only is it a hard break from the continuity, it also happened to be unfunny and really terrible, which didn't happen. And so then they went back and they did do an in-continuity, legacy sequel, requel, belated sequel, whatever you want to call it, and that was taken in a little better by some of the fan base, though there were a lot of people who did not like some of the fan service that was involved with that one. But I was not one of those. I enjoyed Ghostbusters Afterlife. And so sometimes you do need to listen to them, but you don't need to listen to them 100%. And the other example I will pull up, and one that may be divisive to some listeners here, was the Star Wars sequels. So people had wanted to see what happened after Return of the Jedi for a very long time. So then when we finally did get new Star Wars movies, people were a little disappointed because George Lucas decided to go backwards and do the prequels. And a lot of people were like, I don't care how Darth Vader became Darth Vader. I want to see what happens after the fall of the Empire. Now, at least for those people, there had been sequels that were in non-film form. They were in books and comics and toys and everything else pretty much. And that was the expanded universe, which are now called Star Wars Legends. So after that, people were like, well, we may not have a sequel in that one, but we have a sequel in other forms where we know about, Jedi twins and Mara Jade and all these other characters that are existing there. But then Disney buys Lucasfilm, and Disney decides to make sequels because they know that the fans have wanted sequel movies for the longest time. And since they were going to do away with the expanded universe because you can't really do those stories when Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher had aged out, because a lot of those stories take place like a couple years after Empire Strikes Back. So by necessity, you're stuck with coming up with new stories that take place, 30 years later. And so they hire, J.J. Abrams, who he made 2 Star Wars, or Star Trek movies, rather, that were basically just a spin on some Star Wars stuff. At least his 2009 Star Trek is very much A New Hope inspired, as opposed to Into Darkness, which is just sort of a spin on Wrath of Khan. But basically, he had carte blanche. He could have come up with any future for Star Wars. I think the main edict that they wanted to definitely give the fans is to not make it the green screen of Palooza that the prequels were, to put in some more practical settings and practical creature effects and things like that, because in the years since the prequel trilogy had come out, and the prequel trilogy to this day is still viewed rather negatively, to perhaps too negatively, I would argue. I mean, not Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones is pretty terrible. But I think Phantom Menace is probably derided more than it should be, with the Jar Jar Binks of it all, and Return of the Sith as well. That they still could be a lot better, and there's definitely flaws in the conception of them, as well as the retconning continuity stuff. But I don't think they're like nearly as bad as people sometimes like to claim they are. But still, a lot of the main complaints that had solidified after the release of those films and their legacy was that it's too much CGI junkathon, and not a lot of practical stuff. So I think that was probably one of the only edicts that Disney may have given. But then, J.J. Abrams has this carte blanche, and what does he make? He makes The Force Awakens. Now, a lot of people might claim, especially the people who do not like Last Jedi, might claim that Force Awakens is the best of the sequel trilogy, and I firmly disagree. Sorry, people might turn this off right now because of how polarizing it is, but I think Last Jedi is the only film of the sequel trilogy that is good, so come fight me. But Force Awakens is got to be the laziest, most insulting legacy sequel that has been made, because it undoes all of the progress made in Return of the Jedi. Oh, we defeated the Empire? Well, guess what? We have a brand new Empire called the First Order, and it operates exactly the same. Oh, we defeated the Emperor? There's a brand new Emperor named Snoke. Oh, the Darth Vader's gone? There's a brand new Darth Vader named Kylo Ren. It's basically like, oh, all of the progress, it was all for naught, because 30 years later, nothing has fucking changed. Like, you could clearly, the expanded universe showed how you can have villains and Sith and all of this other stuff post Return of the Jedi, that you can still have sort of a fragile New Republic in the making, but instead they just completely take you back to square one. So it's as if nothing in that original trilogy fucking mattered, because you're right back where you started. How lazy and insulting and depressing is that all of those great, memorable events from those 3 great movies that were made in the 70s and 80s, it's as if none of that happened because they're right back to square one. And it ended up that he made Force Awakens basically just this carbon copy of A New Hope, where it hits almost all of the same fucking beats. And it's like, wow, you were so scared to do anything new because of how poorly the prequel trilogy was looked at, that you made the laziest, easiest fucking piece of shit. Like, how dare you? How dare you waste our time and enthusiasm to just make that anodyne bullshit? And so, as time has gone on, because when I first saw Force Awakens, I was like, whatever. But as time has gone on, I have just disliked it more and more. Like, the one part of that film that does not give in to fan service is that you do not have Luke Skywalker in it until the last minute, and he doesn't say anything. Keeping Luke Skywalker away from the audience in that movie is like the one daring thing it does. It's also probably the least successful choice of that movie, because the one thing that a lot of fans really wanted to see was to see your core three together again, to see Han, Leia, and Luke all together, but instead you keep Luke apart. I guess you could say that having Han and Leia like estranged maybe does something too, but otherwise it's just no. And the few good ideas that are brand new are completely wasted, like a stormtrooper that goes rogue and turns against the Empire or First Order or whatever. They also don't really explain why they went from clones to kidnapping children. It seems like clones would be less hassle, but whatever. Those are Star Wars diehards, which I am not. Can probably explain that more. But so then after, I don't want to say there were a lot of complaints about Force Awakens, but there was certainly a vocal minority, such as myself, that was sort of like, okay, but I'd like to see them do something new now that they've made something familiar and boring with that first one. And so Rian Johnson was hired to do Last Jedi, and he did something that, in my opinion, thumbed its nose at The Force Awakens. And I think perhaps the reason I like Last Jedi so much is because I hate Force Awakens. And since The Last Jedi is sort of a big fuck you to all of the lazy bullshit in Force Awakens, I appreciate it. Now, some people, Red Letter Media and a very vocal group on like Twitter and the internet, think that it went too far in the direction of subverting expectations, that it did the Ghostbusters 2016 thing where it went too far from what people want. And maybe I'd say, like, if I did not hate Force Awakens, I may not feel as generous toward Last Jedi, but as someone who was starting to feel bored with Star Wars and how it seemed to be capitulating to the fans of old and sort of just kind of what they feel they want but shouldn't want, I guess, I really liked Last Jedi. I liked that it had Yoda not really caring about the sacred texts. I liked that it tried to do a little bit of social commentary with the rich people on the casino planet, even if that section of the film doesn't work as well. I like that it's just like fuck Snoke and fuck Captain Phasma and fuck all your characters that were just created to sell Hasbro toys. Let the past die type of stuff. I like the idea of breaking Star Wars away from the shackles of just laziness and boring bullshit, and just allowing it to be something new and fresh. And there's a lot of good stuff in that. I mean, yeah, maybe the Yo Mama joke at the beginning doesn't work. I mean, I'm not saying it's a perfect movie. There's stuff in there that doesn't work at all. It still doesn't help the Rey character, who I always felt didn't have much of a personality. And it doesn't help the Finn character, who could have been a lot richer in the entire trilogy, but is just kind of wasted. Though I do like the Rose character. So yeah, there are issues I have with The Last Jedi, but I'd still think it's the only movie of the sequel trilogy that is any good. And I applaud it for doing the exact opposite of what Force Awakens did, which was, it wasn't just lazy carbon copy bullshit. It tried to do something that was a bit more expansive and a bit more original. But people have different opinions about how successful that was. And I think it was pretty damn successful, but a lot of people really despise that movie. And it's sort of become the catch-all phrase of, I hear so many people talking about Scream 6 and they're like, they better not Last Jedi this one or whatever. And it's like, we have 5 Scream movies. 4 of them good. Four of them, except for the very end of 4, good. But we have that formula. We've seen that. I am open to new things happening in Scream. I mean, we already don't have Sidney Prescott. And, sometimes I've appeared on a stream with Master Chaos, and I like his channel, and he's a huge Scream acolyte. But I do disagree with his conception that the Scream films have to be about Sidney Prescott. In fact, if my theory is correct and Scream 6 is about true crime, it almost makes sense that it's not about her. Because I feel like the true crime genre in general is always more focused on the killers than it is the victims. The victims sort of just become like a side effect of it. And even true crime narratives or things based on true crime that try to put the victims front and center, like the Dahmer miniseries, they still get a backlash for how they treat it. And so it would make sense that if there is a Ghostface killer who is obsessed with true crime and the true Ghostface killings of the universe as opposed to the stab films, they wouldn't care so much about survivor Sidney Prescott. They'd care about the people who are related to OG killer Billy Loomis. Now, again, Billy Loomis is only the OG killer if you discount Roman Bridger from Scream 3, which I do because Scream 3 is not canon. So it would make sense that they would be more after the two Carpenter girls who are blood relatives of Billy Loomis, or for Gale Weathers, who is the author of the Woodsboro Murders book, which is the true crime piece of nonfiction that inspired the whole thing, that codified the details of the Ghostface killings from Woodsboro in 96. And so the idea that Sidney would not be a part of that true crime-obsessed killer's whole thing, that makes sense. And so I think if it does take the true crime aspect of it, then it would make sense that we'd finally have Ghostface killers that don't give a fuck about Sidney Prescott. And so if my theory is correct, that might explain why they're not after Sidney, why they're after the Carpenter girls. And so that way I don't believe that the Scream movies necessarily have to be about Sidney Prescott. I mean, yes, I'm a fan of Neve Campbell. I'm a fan of that character. I would love if Sidney Prescott were in the movie, and I would love if the people at Paramount Pictures and Spyglass paid her what she was worth for a lead role in a film, in a Scream film. But, that's not the world we currently live in. Maybe for Scream 7. And so, this is a whole sort of way around where I discuss Star Wars and Ghostbusters and all of this stuff to get back to Scream. But it's sort of like, I hope that the people who made Scream 6... I mean, a lot of this conjecture has come out since that movie's already been completed, so, I mean, they're not listening to this feedback anyway. But I hope that they have gone in a direction that is a little new and fresh. I mean, there's some things you still are always going to want in a Scream movie. You're going to want a Ghostface costume. You can change it up a little bit, and this one has an aged costume, apparently, which is probably one of the Ghostface costumes used in a previous Scream film, or one of the previous Ghostface killers, hence my true crime theory. So it's possible that they're changing it up a little bit with the costume. Or even Killjoy Jake, who made that recent Red Right Hand fan film that was decent. They put in like this devil one with horns and stuff, which is kind of like the Ghostface official knockoffs that you can buy like Spirit Halloween. And those are pretty cool. And so there's stuff you can do with that. But you just kind of need a Ghostface thing. You need that knife, that Buck 120 or that modified Buck 120 knife. They can use other stuff though too. I mean, and they do. They use garage doors. So but you still want some sort of whodunit angle. But there's things. I mean, aside from the opening of Scream 4, we've never seen two Scream killers in Ghostface costume at the same time on camera together. Now, during the opening of the original Scream, chances are both Billy and Stu were wearing Ghostface costumes, hence the what door am I at thing. They were at both doors regardless. So they probably were killing in tandem at some points in some of the other movies as well. But we've never seen them do that together. We've never had more than two killers. We've never had three you could do. Technically, we had one, Scream 3, but Scream 3 is not canon. And also, originally, there was a second killer. It was going to be the girl played by Emily Mortimer, and they changed it because, that movie was a fucking mess. Fucking Aaron Kruger and the Weinsteins. But you could play with the number of killers. You could play with how many are on camera at one time. I mean, even Scream 5 changed the formula a little bit, where the opening kill isn't even a kill. It's a maiming, it's a wounding. But Jenna Ortega survives, so the opening kill isn't even killed. So there's different ways to that. I'd say the one thing that they probably can't do is change the Roger Jackson Scream voice. I mean, they tried to do that with Scream 3, again, not canon, with the weird multi-voice changer thing, and that fucking sucked. So I'd say that's probably like the one fan thing that I'm about that I'm like, no, don't do that. It's also a little weird. I guess I should bring this up since this is more recent. The new Halloween trilogy. A lot of people really hated Halloween Ends. I was not one of them. I actually liked Halloween Ends quite a bit. I liked that it went in this fresh direction with this Corey Cunningham thing. Yeah, I do agree with the complaint that if you're going to make that movie about Corey Cunningham, that they could have put like a cameo of that character in Halloween Kills, maybe. But aside from that, I did like that they went in a fresh direction, but it seems like a lot of fans just wanted the same Halloween movie we get every time, which was Michael Myers just killing a bunch of people and then having a climactic fight with Laurie. It's like, all right, well, we have that. We have so many other movies of that. Halloween Kills, a movie people did not like either. I liked it. That's fine. I actually kind of like Kills more than Halloween 2018, to be quite honest. I guess I'm very contrarian here. But that movie, Michael Myers probably kills more people in a single film than in any other single Halloween film in Halloween Kills. You want Michael Myers murdering people, Halloween Kills is your movie. But the whole Evil Dies Tonight of it all, and people just still didn't like that one. And Big John, Little John. Yeah, there's a lot of choices in those movies that, fine, I don't agree with either. But you got that. So you got the Michael Myers just killing people movie, and you didn't like that. And then you get the movie that tries to do something different, and you don't like that. So it's like, what the fuck do you want? It's also odd that so many of the people who disliked Halloween Ends for being a difference of the formula, these are the same people that in the last 10 years have rehabilitated Halloween 3. Halloween 3 was pretty universally derided for a very long time for not being a Michael Myers Halloween movie, and it's really only in the past, I want to say 10 years, that people have come around, and now you have people saying like, oh, Halloween 3 is the best Halloween movie, and I don't agree with that. I like Halloween 3, but come on. There's some silly stuff in Halloween 3, fucking Stonehenge and shit. It's definitely not better than the OG original, but it still has a Carpenter score, it still has some interesting stuff in it, Silver Shamrock. I really kind of credit the Halloween 3 reappraisal to Darcy the Mail Girl. I feel like it's especially been in like the last 5 years since we've had the last drive-in and Darcy championing that film, that Halloween 3 has started getting such like positive views in people's minds. Because as someone who has liked Halloween 3 since he was a teenager, it's not my favorite sequel, but it's in my top like 5 sequels probably. It did get a lot of hate, but it's really, really only in the last like 5 to 10 years that it's gotten such this massive swing. It's gone like 180 degrees to where many people are now claiming that Halloween 3 is their favorite Halloween movie, and that simply was not happening in like 2010. So but a lot of those same people who are like, I love Halloween 3 because it did something different, are sort of like, what the fuck? Halloween Ends? I don't care about fucking Corey Cunningham, or I can't believe he's, Michael Myers just living in the sewer or whatever. It's like, bitch, a lot of those people also like Halloween H2O, which is probably my least favorite Halloween movie of all, even worse than Resurrection. And I recently rewatched H2O and Resurrection. But I hate Halloween H2O. That one, apparently, Michael Myers' disappearance between 2 and H2O isn't explained at all. He just shows up. And then that movie, that entire third act of that very short movie is just a Laurie and Michael confrontation. In fact, the best part of that movie is the very ending that Resurrection ends up retconning. So it's I don't know. I feel like a lot of complaints about some movies that try something new are almost disingenuous, because it's like maybe some people are just going to complain about everything, because any of the times you're expanding these franchises, every sequel is always going to be fighting to live up to the original or your particularly pet favorite installment, and it can't do that. I'm never going to be 13 years old in 1996 again seeing the original Scream for the first time. It's not going to happen. So no other movie is going to recapture that. Hell, I'm not going to be 14 years old in 1997 and recapture Scream 2, which is my favorite Scream sequel. That's not going to happen again. So the idea that another Scream film can recapture the magic of the original or the second one, I don't know. Though in the years that have gone by, I've seen a lot of Scream fans reappraise 4. There's a lot of people who claim that 4 is their favorite sequel, and I don't begrudge them that, because there's a lot of really good shit in Scream 4. It's really just that everything that happens when they wake up in the hospital that Aaron Kruger wrote that has the laziest shitty writing. Oh, how did he know that I was stabbed in that shoulder or whatever? It's such shitty writing. And then Dewey getting hit with a fucking bedpan and Jill getting the defibrillator on her two sides. It's a fucking Looney Tunes cartoon. Jesus Christ, Aaron Kruger. So that movie knocks it down a bit. And I actually like Scream 5 more than 4 as well, to be quite honest. But, I was recently on that Voyage to the Bottom of the Barrel, and Bullet Blake was claiming that 3 is better than 5. And I'm like, in no universe is Scream 3 better than Scream 5. Scream 3 is not even better than Scary Movie. I mean, Scream 3 is fucking abysmal, which is why I just refuse to consider it canon. And hopefully, fingers crossed, there'll be nothing in 6 that forces me to consider it canon. I mean, if they show Roman Bridger's fucking Ghostface costume, I guess I have to. I'll find a way. I'll bend over backwards. There's like Scream 3 Hollywood or Stab 3 Hollywood horror. Yeah, that's based on something else that happened. Mostly, how I put it in my head is that something similar to but better than Scream 3 happened in the Scream universe. So that inspired Stab 3. But that's my fan thing where I just refuse to consider Scream 3 canon. Also, as far as I'm concerned, the hospital ending of Scream 4 never happened. Jill died on her way back to her home planet. So, anyway, I just wanted to capture some of my thoughts about, fan backlash over filmmakers trying to do something new and fresh. Which doesn't mean that I think that every time they try to do something new and fresh that it works 100%. There's stuff in Halloween Ends that I don't think works quite well. There's stuff in Last Jedi that I don't think works quite well, but I would rather see filmmakers try something new and fail than just give generic and boring fan service. Like, I will take 1,000,000 Halloween Ends and Last Jedis before I see another Force Awakens. Or even, Rise of Skywalker was also an attempt to course correct from Last Jedi, where it's like, oh, well, we tried fan service. We tried lazy, boring fan service. And then Rian Johnson came in and tried something original, and people didn't like it. Or at least a vocal minority didn't like it. Actually, The Last Jedi is probably 50-50 at this point as far as what people think. So we're going to go back to fan service. We're going to bring back the Emperor again. It's like, you took away Snoke, so we're going to just fucking bring the Emperor back. How? Doesn't matter. Somehow he's returned. And it just did not work this time. At least they didn't make another fucking Death Star. Jesus Christ. That was another thing I hated. It's like, oh, we have Starkiller Base. It's like, really? How many times are they going to try making Death Stars before they get rid of fucking Death Stars? But that's me rambling a bit on this Christmas Eve because I have nothing else to do. Thank you all for listening to my hot takes here. But let me know in the comments, what do you think? Do you prefer that filmmakers slavishly devote themselves to what some fans want? Or would you like to see them branch off and do something new? It's kind of funny, like right now, we're sort of in, a lot of what I'm seeing on the internet is about DC and James Gunn and Peter Safran taking over, and you have a lot of people who are upset about certain breakings away from Snyder's continuity and casting, and then other people really excited about breaking away from that. Personally, for me, I didn't like any of Snyder's films in the DCEU. I also hate Gal Gadot, and I hated those 2 Wonder Woman movies, even that first one that's pretty well liked. I like the Aquaman movie. I like Shazam. So there's some parts of that continuity that I'm okay with. I liked what James Gunn did with Peacemaker and The Suicide Squad, but otherwise I am fine to just fucking consign the Snyderverse to the dust heap of history, but there's some people who are vocally pissed off about that. But at least I don't think James Gunn is beholden to trying to appeal to Snyder's fan service. And plus, none of those Snyder movies, most of them eked out a profit, but they were still disappointments compared to, what Marvel's doing financially. And certainly they're disappointments critically and as far as like the general opinion. I'd say like the average person does not like Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, even if the Snyder people claim that they enjoy it or trick themselves into enjoying it. So you just lately there's a lot of this sort of discourse on film Twitter and film YouTube and the internet in general about sort of the backlash from trying to do something new and toward what is it? Reject modernity, embrace traditionality, and that seems to be what they're wanting to do. And I'd rather see new stuff. I'd rather see them try something new. Like, you can do that the wrong way, which is Ghostbusters 2016, or you can do that the right way, which I would argue Last Jedi did, or at least attempted to do, and was like 85% successful in my view. But whatever, it's film, it's all opinion. And now that we have some of that fandom coming into Scream 6 discourse, it's worrying me. Like, I know, to bring up MC again, Master Chaos, he didn't like that Scream 5 was about toxic fandom, but I don't think everyone who dislikes Last Jedi or disliked Halloween Ends or whatever is toxic. There's a difference between not liking a movie and having reasons for that. Like, there are plenty of people who did not like Scream 5 for various reasons. Now, some of those reasons may be more valid than others. If you're like, I don't like Scream 5 because they killed off Dewey, I don't think that's particularly valid. Now, if I don't like Scream 5 because they killed Dewey this way, and I would have preferred they killed Gale, or I would have preferred that they waited till the third act for more emotional drama in it, or I thought the ending was too silly or whatever, then that is a bit more legitimate. But I think the idea of you can't kill him because he's a fan favorite and untouchable is bullshit. But even bad criticism is not the same as toxic fandom. Like saying like I didn't like that movie because they didn't do what I would have did if I wrote it. That is poor criticism, but it's not toxic. Toxic fandom is like when you start attacking the filmmakers, like if you start like tweeting death threats at James Gunn or Rian Johnson because they didn't do in their film what you would have done if you had controlled it. Like, as much as I hate Ghostbusters 2016, I've never tweeted a bad thing at Paul Feig about it, because Paul Feig has done some stuff I like, Freaks and Geeks, Superbad, he's done some good stuff. Bridesmaids. I don't hate Paul Feig. I just thought he had a concept for Ghostbusters that was shit, and it was also poorly executed. He did have one good idea, though. I like the idea of a human villain purposely killing himself to become a ghost. That is the one good idea in Ghostbusters 2016. It's unfortunately wasted in that movie, but it was a solid idea for that universe. But yeah, it's like, you don't have to be mean and shitty to the filmmakers or the actors or any of that. Or you don't have to, harass the Warner Brothers executives because you want the Snyder cut to be released. I mean, I love seeing multiple cuts of movies and different versions. I would love to have the connections where I could find the work prints of some movies and see, what was edited out of them and things, though other people do when they write about them. I'd love to see the R-rated cut of Nothing But Trouble that's called Vulcanvania and all of these other, lost, deleted cuts of movies. But I don't harass people for it. Plus, a lot of the movies that I want to see alternate cuts for, the alternate footage is lost anyway, so you can't really see it in pristine edition. So yeah, there is a difference between that and toxic fandom. Like, Richie and Amber in Scream 5, yeah, they're people who hate a movie so much that they're going to go out and murder people so that Hollywood can make better movies. Yeah, that's toxic fandom, man. That's fucked up. Stalking people, harassing people, that's toxic fandom. Bullying people, that's toxic fandom. If you just write a shitty review that has invalid criticisms, that's not toxic fandom, that's just a shitty review. But but a review that you disagree with is not in and of itself a shitty review either. One of the great things about film criticism is that you can read reviews from people you disagree with, and if they're making valid points, even if you disagree with them, because a logical point can be disagreed with, even if it's logical or cogent or what have you. If someone like disagrees about the pacing of a movie. Okay, maybe I think the pacing was good and you think the pacing was too slow. That's fine, but it's a valid criticism. We can argue about the editing rhythms of that movie, or if the pacing works for what the filmmaker's trying to say and things. But I mean, I love reading reviews that I disagree with, so I can see like what their points are. I used to love reading Roger Ebert's reviews. I didn't always agree with him, but he always made like really good points or very interesting observations, even when I disagreed with them. So it's like the best review I disagree with is one where it's like, okay, I see exactly where you're coming from. I just happen to disagree with you. We just have a different opinion about that. But it's like, yeah, you may have valid criticisms of this, but I have a different interpretation kind of thing. So I don't want this entire long rant I'm making to be like anyone who disagrees with me is wrong, or anyone who doesn't want something new is immediately some sort of reactionary troglodyte, because that's not what I'm saying, or anyone who dislikes someone trying something new is toxic, because that's not true either. It's just that there is a lot of that component where people who don't want to see new and original stuff, they can have a very strong backlash. I guess I can call myself out here and say that maybe I should lay off Aaron Kruger a little bit, since he's not wholly responsible for the shittiness that is Scream 3 and the very ending of Scream 4. A lot of what he put in there was forced due to constraints put on him by Bob and Harvey Weinstein, who ruined many films under Dimension, not just Scream 3 and the ending of Scream 4. But as much as I badmouth Aaron Kruger, I don't tweet directly to him. I don't write him negative letters or anything. I haven't tried to like yell at him in person or anything. There's limits there. Also, for all I know, Aaron Kruger might be a very nice man. And he did, as MC mentioned in that stream I was on, he did write Arlington Road. Arlington Road is a very good movie. It's so good a movie that I almost don't believe Aaron Kruger wrote it, that maybe there was someone who did an uncredited rewrite on it to make it better. He also wrote Reindeer Games, which isn't a great movie, but it did have some interesting twists and stuff in it. Also, that was another movie that was ruined by Dimension, and because I believe that movie is not the director's cut that John Frankenheimer wanted it to be. So there's a lot of blame to go around on some of those movies, and I'm maybe a little too hard on him. I just really fucking hate Scream 3. Jesus Christ. Anyway, I've ranted for like over 45 minutes now, so I'm going to cut this short. Thank you if you listen to any of this, because I know no one stuck around for this whole thing. Thank you for listening. Please, like, share, subscribe, do all the stuff that people do on these things. And I hope you have a very good holiday. I will be spending Christmas alone, going to the movies. I'll be seeing The Whale and then Babylon. Because I have no one to spend Christmas with because I'm single. So, but thank you all. I hope you have a good day.